Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on over to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. I'm your host, Matt Tardio. And today it looks like Israel is set on fire, and I think we might have actually found the cause. Massive fires are spreading all around the country. People are worried about terrorism, and as it turns out, there is a key piece of evidence that we just discovered. Additionally, it looks like President Zelensky decided it'd be a good idea to threaten Russia's Victory Day parade, which is scheduled to take place on May 9th. That is a massive parade. We're going to go over all of that and some more, including attacks on the Druze over inside of Syria and some of the things going on back here in the States. As everybody is getting ready to roll in here this morning, I've got a little video for you guys to kind of ease up the tension a little bit.
I know I'm insane and I know I'm the internet's favorite crash out. What I'm going to say right now is I'm not paying my debt anymore. What we're doing from this point forward is a debt strike 2025. If I have to do it alone and be insane, I will. I literally will. The fact that we would continue paying our debt, we can't stop paying our rent because that's too crazy. It'll put a lot of people in harm. I'm sick of protesting. It does nothing. I don't want to go to war because look how skinny my arms are. We have to do something. I'm not paying my debt. You can join me on this or you cannot. I'm going to take a picture of, and I'm going to keep records of the debt that I have right now because when the interest rates go up on that, I'm not paying those either, even when they start to meet our demands. And the demands are as such: abolish ICE. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's get rid of ICE.
I want those men home from El Salvador. I don't care.
I do, because he's a terrorist.
And we need to protect Medicaid.
Yeah, at first I thought this was a joke until she freaked out the way she did and was like, I don't care.
The Department of Education needs to be restored. I want critical race theory in the classroom, period. We need to literally be delusional. I'm going to be delusional right now. I will stand here right now, be delusional, make fun of me all you want. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. And if they don't meet our demands, then what we're going to do is then we're going to stop paying our rent. But for right now, stop paying your bills. Stop paying your debt. We're going to start there.
Okay, so stop paying your bills. This sounds like an excuse to be financially irresponsible. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a really good excuse to be financially irresponsible, as if this is going to somehow hurt the United States government.
It's like, what the fuck do I have to... Oh, my credit score for the house that I'll never buy? I already am not allowed to rent because I don't make enough money. I have to have a cosigner anyway, so what does my credit score even fucking matter?
And there it is. There is the whole reason behind the frickin' madness. Okay, let's go ahead and get over it. Looks like you guys are starting to pour in here. Did you guys get your notifications this morning? Good morning. Good to see you. I want to make sure YouTube's pushing out the notifications like they're supposed to. If it's not, might be an internal setting that I got to go over and fix and kind of work at. I would like to do that. My landlord, he is a BA. Yeah, I mean, he probably is. She's a real peach. Yeah, she is. No, you didn't get a notification. Some of you guys are saying you got a notification. Okay. Negative. Yes. All right. Make sure you guys' notifications are turned on for the channel, so that way you guys can know when we end up going live. Preston Stewart ended up putting this out today. New poster in Iran celebrating the U.S. F-18 that ended up getting lost over inside of the Red Sea. Really kind of cute that they end up celebrating this. There's actually more rumors that are going around about the F-18 today and how it ended up falling off the ship. I ended up taking a look, saw this post a little bit earlier containing some more information about it, and what they're saying. And let me get this up on the screen here for you. What they're saying, this is allegedly imagery from the same day. Now, I looked at where exactly this was over inside of the, how do you want to say it? Over inside of the Red Sea, where the Truman was actually operating at. And what it would appear is that the Truman was kind of operating along this coastline. And there's several other channels that have put this out. But the interesting part about this, butt plug, right? Big butt plug. Yeah, everybody loves their butt plugs, right? Now, the interesting part about this, when you look at it, is this portion of it right here. As it goes up and it makes this big turn, and it comes back around and it makes another big turn. Zigzag pattern could be what they were talking about when it goes down to, how do I want to say this? When it goes down to, how do I want to say it? When it goes down to possible evasive maneuvers. Now, I reached out to a buddy of mine to actually ask him some questions on this. He goes by Intel Schizo, does really, really good work, knows a lot of people, knows a lot of different things, talked to a couple of different folks about this, whether or not, and what I'm trying to figure out is, because of the location that the Truman was operating in, which I'm not going to put on the screen, where all of this went down, but because of the location of where the Truman was operating at, I'm wondering if, because it was so close to Yemen territory, if this isn't something that they're just out there doing, because I started to think about it, if I was worried about this taking place over inside of the Red Sea, obviously the Houthis are constantly doing it. Is this a sort of like evasive pattern that they just typically run, which makes it harder for them to target? That would kind of make sense to me. I think about being like infantrymen on patrol, or, you know, over inside of a hostile territory, that is the type of maneuvering you'd be doing. And that would kind of make sense because the word that I got, Christo coming in, gifting us Speak the Truth membership. Thank you, sir. The word that I got was that they were actually passing this, they were actually moving the F-18 up like an elevation deck or whatever, a little elevator to move the F-18 up when it ended up falling off. Jeffrey Carroll says, I just tuned in and the first thing I hear is, yes, big butt plug. Everybody loves a big butt plug. Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, Jeff, I mean, I don't know if you ended up seeing the meme or not, or whatever it was that we're going over, but that's a real thing. Also over inside of Pakistan, they are now claiming, and this comes from the information minister of Pakistan. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce these guys' names. I'm just going to give you the information that is being put out. The information minister from Pakistan and Pakistan's defense minister both claim that they have credible intelligence that within the next 24 to 36 hours, India is going to strike them in a limited capacity. We don't know exactly what that means. We don't know what that's going to look like, but that's what Pakistan's claiming. It is, I don't know, kind of believable. I've seen a lot of different reports about different, and I mean like massive amounts of military equipment that's been moved across India. But the same thing can be said about here in the United States when I end up seeing video footage of military equipment that's being shipped on rail lines and things of that nature. So I couldn't tell you whether or not it's credible that all of this military equipment is being moved. The geolocation of some of these things hasn't came out. They haven't been talking about where they're going. Ads should not be on aggressive. No, sir. I changed that a while ago to have it on conservative. That is correct. They are on conservative. That is a fact. The point is that there is the only credible information that we have that's coming out right now is by the defense minister. And I don't even know if I would call it credible because it's Pakistan's defense minister and their information officer that's saying that they think India is going to attack them. I know a couple of you guys asked me to look into it. So I wanted to let you guys know that that is what has legitimately been shared about that is possibly what's going to be going out. Now, this is where we're going to start getting interesting. Putin stated that the war in Ukraine is too complicated to be resolved immediately. Listen to this.
Very good morning to you. We start with breaking news this hour. In the last few minutes, the Kremlin has said that the war in Ukraine is too complicated to be resolved immediately. President Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said this morning that the Russian leader is open to peace in Ukraine. He said very intense work is going on with the United States, but said the conflict was so complicated that the quick progress that Washington wants to achieve is difficult. The spokesman also said that Russia must achieve its aims in Ukraine, but that it was ready for direct talks with Kiev. Meanwhile, overnight, 45 people have been injured in Ukraine.
Okay, so interesting. If that's what Putin thinks, is that it's too complicated, the problem is that the complication is actually Putin's demands. I kind of wish Sky News would have reported that. The problem is Putin's demands. Putin is stating that he's basically going to retain all of the frickin' land that he's taken, minus a little chunk here or there. That's obviously something Zelensky's not open to, and Zelensky came out and made a brand new statement in what appears to be like a new outreach program that he's trying, and we're going to get to that statement here in just a sec. At the same time, Russia actually released this video that I'm about to put on the screen of North Korean troops actually fighting over inside Kursk alongside Russian troops. Check this out. If this is not the most propaganda video that I've ever seen in my life, the other thing that I ended up noticing on this is that these troops appear to be way better trained than any of the other ones that I've seen in any of their other videos. And the Ruskies themselves look a little bit more, how do I want to say, better outfitted than your standard Ruskies that you tend to see. So my assessment looking at this is that you have some really like well-trained people. And as I'm going through this, I don't really see a lot of anything. Part of me is starting to think that this is just a propaganda video of them assaulting a completely and totally empty village. And this is probably the most accurate representation of what that region should look like and continues to look like. Airsoft fight, right? Well, look at the video. You don't hear any return fire that's coming throughout the entire thing. You've got them shooting around corners as if there's people there, but there's nothing really going on in it. And like I said, it's a Russian released video. So if you go back and you look at it, there's not really... I mean, you look at these guys, like, look at this dude, right? Look at how clean this weapon system is. Does this really look like a weapon system that's been in war? Obviously, in my opinion, the internals, at least that's how it always was on my weapon systems, the internals are always freaking like crisp and clean and ready to go for a fight. But when I look at this and I look at this guy, number one, he doesn't even have his damn ear pro down here in the beginning. So that'll tell you what type of freaking, like how much fighting they're actually doing over in this region, right? I get he's running a can, but at the same time, dude, give me a flipping break. Like if you're actually in war and you have ear pro, you want that shit down to preserve it to the best of your freaking ability. And you notice how they're all these like really short clips as they go through. None of this appears to be freaking legitimate at all. And it's the same thing with all of these guys. Like they look really clean. They look really well put together. Fox McCloud says Shipley's Donuts is a superior donut than Krispy Kreme, and anybody that disagrees supports Russia. Right, and I don't know, for those of you that have ever been to war, running across an open field and stopping in the middle of an open field like that and taking a knee, like this, for example, sitting there and taking a knee in an open field and just launching a couple of these suckers at a building doesn't really make that much sense either. Not to mention all of the grass is completely mowed. Like it actually looks well kept. Take a look at this freaking scene right here, at how well kept this region is. It doesn't, I'm sorry, to me, this is not people freaking fighting a damn war. This seems like a very well orchestrated, put together propaganda video between Russia and North Korea. Yeah, LARPing is the way to go. Again, we look at this gentleman's firearm here. He's got a, like it's glowing. It's so damn clean, right? The guy's got his mouth open. Like he doesn't have any dirt on him whatsoever. Like everything's crisp and clean on these guys. And he's not even really, he's just flinging rounds for the camera. And then there's this random video of them planting the flag, and wait for it. Oh, here we go. Here's the money shot. You got somebody pulling security while they plant the flag because that looks perfect. Like, yep, that's what you, one guy pulling security. If they're really that worried about it, Jesus, that ain't happening. Oh, good hug from the drone. Hey, look, there's our famous Russian with his ear pro still up from earlier on in the video. And here's the other star of the show. Yeah, this to me seems like a very well orchestrated video of propaganda. It's disturbing the amount of people that actually think that that's kind of a thing. And here's them walking along. Oh, God, look at them hanging out next to it, Bradley. Good for them. And then walking over, taking a salute. Yeah. What this actually looks like is a post withdrawal video from the Ukrainian forces and Russia going in there with the North Koreans to make some sort of propaganda. Now, here's Zelensky. And this statement from Zelensky, I got it up on the screen. I'm sorry, I'm not going to speak over it. I'm going to put it up on the screen here in a second. I want you to pay attention to the words that Zelensky says here. Because what Zelensky is actually alleging, from what I know about the laws of armed conflict, and then I looked into it a little bit deeper, it's actually legal if he conducts it correct. If you just listen.
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Коротко про сьогодні. Взяв участь в роботі саміту ініціативи трьох морів. Один з форматів, які об'єднують наш регіон. від Чорного моря до Балтійського та Адріатики. Правильний формат – те, що наближає нас до Європейського Союзу. Наша пропозиція – зробити формат більш практичним. Політика в ньому вже відображена достатньо. Тепер варто додати конкретики, не тільки в тому, що стосується логістики і стосується транспортних шляхів. Зараз, після блекауту в Іспанії та Португалії, після всіх російських ударів по нашій енергетиці, після об'єктивно непростих змін на газовому ринку Європи для всіх в Європі, очевидно, що потрібно більше спільних проєктів, більше допомоги один одному саме в енергетиці і в інших питаннях критичної інфраструктури. Зв'язок, трубопроводи, безпека портів. Український внесок в це може бути значним, і ми пропонуємо партнерам робити разом більше саме на цих напрямках. Сьогодні
What's amazing, and I didn't cover it over the shows, but yesterday we ended up seeing, over inside of the UK, we ended up seeing some electrical substations that appeared to have been like set on fire. And that type of stuff does happen, but we also had some of that stuff happen here in Texas, and there's been major electrical outlets over inside of the outings over across the EU. All right. And yesterday there was warnings about cyber attacks here inside of the United States of America as well. And so as he's talking about these different attacks and bringing it up, saying that they could have these new, partnerships and things like that going together, to me, it basically alleges that Russia is the one that's behind all of this. Of course, I have Russian trolls in here today. They're here every day. I'm sure they've already spammed me with the sex bots.
ж обговорювали підготовку нового рішення Ради національної безпеки і оборони. Важливо і надалі тиснути на російські мережі впливу, а також на всі їхні виробництва та торговельні операції. Українські санкції стараємось по максимуму синхронізувати з усіма в Європі, щоб це було спільною позицією. І вже маємо хороші результати, у тому числі у закритих російських виробництвах, які працювали на їхню оборону. Готуємось також і до розмови з Америкою щодо нових санкційних кроків. Обираємо саме такі больові точки Росії, які найбільше спонукатимуть Москву до дипломатії.
Now, that is actually kind of interesting that because again, what he just hinted at is that the U.S. and Ukraine are now on the same side, and that they're working at presenting new sanctions for Russia. They're going to push them over there. I explained to you guys the pressure that reopening the Red Sea is going to end up putting on the Russian economy, and the bombing over inside of Iran that is yet to come, that is also going to put pressure on the Iranian and the Russian military-industrial complex. It's going to knock out, as long as it's done correctly, over 30% of the aerial munitions that would be flying at Ukraine. So when he talks about additional sanctions, right, when that Red Sea reopens and you start talking about affecting 30% of Russia's freaking expendable budget, when you start talking about that and then imposing more sanctions on them, dude, that's going to make their life really hard, and it's going to make it harder for them to fight the war. So that kind of makes sense why Russia would put out a well-orchestrated propaganda video of them and North Korean troops assaulting empty buildings.
Вони повинні робити чіткі кроки до завершення війни. І ми наполягаємо, що безумовне і повне припинення вогню має стати першим кроком. Росія повинна це зробити. Зараз вони переживають, що у них парад під питанням. І правильно переживають.
Did you hear that? Did everybody hear that? I want you to hear this again, because I saw two different people allege this before Zelensky made this statement. And he came out and he made it. And he made it openly. It's very brief. It's very short. But it directly threatens the Victory Day parade that takes place annually inside of the Red Square in Moscow. And it commemorates the victory of Russians over the Nazis during World War II. There is a massive display that ends up going on there. And you have all sorts of top-ranking generals, foreign diplomats, and everybody else that's going to be over there. Here you go again. Listen.
Вони переживають, що у них парад під питанням. І правильно переживають. Але повинні переживати, що ця війна досі триває. Вони повинні закінчити війну. Говорив сьогодні з головкомом Сирським. Воїни тримають позиції, захищають нашу державу. Я хочу подякувати кожному, хто стійкий заради України, хто працює заради незалежності України. Слава Україні!
And there you go. That is a direct threat to the frickin' Victory Day parade taking place over in Moscow. I saw another one that ended up coming out, and there's now people that are sharing this. Now, this is an example of what the Victory Day parade looks like. You can see the stands that are kind of like set up over there. And they end up marching a buttload of armor and troops and everything through the Red Square every single year. It would be technically a valid military target under the laws of armed conflict, as far as I know, but it would depend on how Ukraine decides to execute it. They are supposed to give out proper warnings. That, to me, seems like a warning. It doesn't say they have to go drop leaflets. It doesn't say that they have to do anything crazy or anything like that, but civilians do attend. If you guys look down the bottom left corner, you'll end up seeing some civilians down there. Normally the stands are reserved for freaking people of high-ranking shit. And then you end up seeing like it's basically a massive, what we call in the United States military, pass and review, but on a whole other like freaking like communist scale that can't even be defined. It reminds me of the type of stuff that you end up seeing in like North Korea, like all of these other places. I did an estimate on how much armor and stuff actually exists. Well, I didn't do the estimate. I asked AI to estimate because I don't have the time to count up all of these different pieces. So I asked AI to estimate how many actually exist, like how much armor is actually out there at any given period of time during the parade. And it's estimated that they have well over 100 pieces of equipment that end up getting paraded through the Red Square. I think it's actually more than that from all the videos I've seen. I'd be shocked if it was only 100. They end up having like freaking like ballistic missiles. They end up having armor. They end up having artillery pieces. They have all of this crap that they end up putting on display. Over 9,000 Russian military personnel estimated would be present. Over 9,000. And so when you look at the law of armed conflict and you talk about proportionality and you talk about the effects that would end up having, except for that one tank parade some years ago, right? And so when you talk about the law of armed conflict and what it says about all of this, it breaks down proportionality. It makes sure that you do your due diligence not to kill civilians. This is clearly going to have a big impact on the battlefield when you start talking about all of Russia's like top leadership that would end up being out there. It would be a massive blow. And the other thing, really, to think about is not only like that could be its primary effect, going after key leaders and going after frickin' like military infrastructure and personnel. You're talking about over 750,000 estimates, upward of 1 million Russian troops that ended up getting killed or wounded in this war. And so when you talk about the effects of being able to take out just a couple thousand, well, that would have a pretty decent effect on the battlefield. When you start talking about the key leaders that are going to be out there, that would have a pretty decent effect on the battlefield. If Putin's sitting out there at the freaking parade during the pass and review, that would be a pretty big effect on the battlefield. Even conscripts end up going out there as well. You are correct. And conscripts end up getting their butts thrown on the front line and dying. Over in Kursk, we had reports of, what was it, people that were in like basic training for 2 weeks and they got thrown weapon systems and told to go to the front line and go fight. Anthony, would an attack on that parade not just make the Russian population believe the Ukraine Nazi propaganda? No, I don't think it would. As a matter of fact, I think an attack on a parade like this would actually piss the Russian population off at Putin. I want you to think about it. This is like a very renowned parade that Russians hold every single year. And it's a huge celebration. It's a huge point of pride. Very, very huge point of pride for them. And if Ukraine was able to get even a single strike in on that, just one strike in the middle of that, and it doesn't cause any civilian casualties, it kills nothing but military personnel, I want you to think psychologically what that would end up doing to the population of Russia. That their massive Victory Day parade that they've been holding for decades, like, is subject to frickin' attack. That would have a very big impact on the Russian population if they were able to take out freaking Putin while he's there. Holy shit. How big of an impact would that be? You think it would make people sign up. I completely and totally disagree with you. I think it would make people go, dang, are we being lied to by our government? Because you guys forget that the Russian population for years, I mean, over a decade now, has been getting lied to about what the Russian military has been doing over inside of Ukraine. All the way back in the early stages of this war, 2014, 2015, all the way back in those early days, you had Russian troops that were dying over in eastern Ukraine, and the Russian government was telling the population that they were dying in training accidents. So the Russian population is literally listening to their government lie to them, and they're well aware of it. You're right. There is a lot of Russians that support the war. There's a lot of Russians that eat up the propaganda, but there is a vast majority of them there is a ton of them that don't. There's a ton of them that ended up fleeing the country. There's a ton of them that don't support the war. There's a ton of them that want this madness to stop. Millions of people affected. Why? For a little bit of land, right? Under the guise of what? Overthrow of a crooked president inside of Ukraine. And the people over in the east just wanted to go away. This is nothing that Putin has ever changed. This is like his mind frame that he goes at. And the people inside of Russia know that. The people inside of Russia know that their president just wants to take over Ukraine and wants to get back to the Soviet Union. And you could say they don't care all you want, but I'm telling you right now, in an attack right here, I said just one. Now imagine if 10 get through or 20 get through. Or there happens to be some sort of precision strike with some other equipment that takes place. Imagine if Putin gets hit. This is a pretty dang big deal. This is a big threat, and I think the Russian population knows it. And I think the Russian population wouldn't take it very good. I think they would get pretty dang pissed off at Putin. Tell me I'm wrong. You can whine and you can complain and you can tell me I'm wrong all you want. I don't even know who this gentleman is, but there's somebody that's claiming that they spoke with Ukraine's intel chief, and he asked him about the Victory Day parade over in Moscow. So the intel chief, Krylo Budanov, this gentleman right here, allegedly when he was asked about Russia's Victory Day parade, he didn't comment any further on it. All he said was, bring earplugs. And that is not the only person that I've heard make that claim. It seems like there is a really big threat on this Russian military victory parade. And if Ukraine actually attacks it, it's going down on May 9th, allegedly, if Russia doesn't change their mind. Alois June wants to know, how good is your Russian? Серьезно, мой русский это очень плохой. Если ты хочешь говорить у меня, нужно говорить у меня, как я ребенок, и, может быть, я буду понимать. Like, if you want to talk to me in Russian, you're going to have, like I said, my Russian is not that great. If you want to talk to me in Russian, you got to speak to me like I'm a child, and maybe I'll understand it. That's what I said. Loosely translated. Victory Gay Parade. You are correct. So that's my issue. And I think that it has a very high probability of going down. I think that it might actually, go down, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, I think that Ukraine actually has the balls to do it. So we'll see what ends up happening. Bring earplugs. If you're Russian and you're listening to this, which allegedly a bunch of you guys are in the chat, make sure you bring your earplugs. Or, don't do it. If you don't think that Ukraine's, possible of it, call no stones and see what happens. I dare you, Russia, call no stones to Ukraine and just see what happens. Just leave yourselves unprotected, see what goes down. We'll be sitting here with the popcorn on May 9th waiting for your asses to get bombed. I'll be waiting. Everybody in the chat's going to be waiting. Thousands of Russian troops will get wiped out. Because, valid military target, right? You got the man that orchestrated the invasion that's going to be sitting there. Let him go after it. Go ahead, whine and complain. We're going to shift focus here a little bit, and we're going to go start talking about Syria. We're going to go over to Syria, where the Druze are actually going at it with frickin' HTS. And they have been, number one, standing up and going up over against HTS. They're going after him, trying to kill him. There's big firefights taking place. And the Druze are basically standing up and saying, nope, we're tired of this crap. And it looks like Israel has actually announced that they ended up conducting a strike in conjunction with the Druze in order to protect them against HTS. So they come out and they openly admit that today. They're not worried about it. All of these little rebel forces that are taking place, and this is a video of the Druze that are actually on their way going down into Israel. Now, they are all allegedly starting to get the heck out of Dodge, pushing south of Damascus, which is where they're supposed to be. Israel set up like their little buffer zone down there and everything else. There's also videos that I'm not going to show you guys today that show an ambush on some of these Druze convoys by HTS as they were getting ready to go up and go start assaulting some of these objectives and pushing them out of some of their areas for their own protection. Now, this, in my opinion, is going to be a pretty big freaking conflict, and Israel is doing their best to back them. For those of you guys that don't know anything about the Druze, they're kind of like old school freaking Muslims, for lack of better terms. If any of you guys are more familiar with it than me, let me know. But the Druze are like old school Muslims. They're not accepted by mainstream Muslims. They have some really crazy beliefs that they actually get into. Well, let me get this out of here. And let me bring up some of these facts for you on these Druze, because they're pretty weird. Well, I don't know about weird, but they have like this different mind frame, different belief system that ends up going into it. We'll go all the way back to 1948 when Israel was founded. You had most Druze inside of Israel decided to side with the new Israeli state. Kind of interesting. And the Druze have been exempt or banned on military service for non-Jews to serve in the IDF. 67, the Druze living in the Golan Heights came under Israeli control after the Six-Day War. 81, Israel formally annexed the Golan Heights, which is where a good chunk of the population of them end up living. And pretty much up to present day after that, they maintain pretty distinct identity. They always end up like aligning with whatever government of the country that they end up living in. They do speak Arabic, they're monotheistic, and their religion is fairly secretive from what I've been able to see. They are not considered Muslim by the mainstreams. They do believe in reincarnation, strict monotheism, esoteric text, and yeah, that's basically about it. So they are very, very loyal to whatever community they're in and whoever's going to be over there to protect them. They even have like a portion of their religion, which blew my mind when I was researching it, because I just like understanding people, that's considered like a secretive, or like they have certain people, I'm trying to remember what the term is. They have certain people that have like the secrets of their religion that they end up like holding on to and things like that. Hey, meathead. What's up there, J-Stick? What's up there, brother? Netanyahu says that the strike that Israel ended up carrying out was a warning strike against the extremists who were going over to attack the Druze. And so he's openly admitting that they are backing them, and they're not going to allow any of the attacks on the Druze communities over inside of Syria. And he says, out of a deep commitment to our Druze brothers in Israel who share strong historical and familial ties with their Druze brethren in Syria. So they're doing it kind of like out of respect, or at least that's what he's saying. Adar the Wholesome says, they try to trick us about their numbers in those parades, drive around the corner and paint new numbers on their vehicles before joining it again. I mean, I could see that, like, honestly, but, you know, in the past, it's also like the different types of military vehicles that they actually have on display. They have a bunch of them. They have a ton of armor. And we'll go take a look at it here at the end of it, because I know people are going to want to talk about it. Over inside Israel, Jerusalem is quite literally freaking burning today, which is wild. And we're going to go over why this is happening. Now, this should remind some of you guys of what took place in LA not that long ago. There is multiple fires that have sprung up around Jerusalem. Today was supposed to be a celebration that ended up, I guess it was still going on, and then they ended up pulling it down. But I mean, take a look at some of this crap, man. Take a look at some of these images that are coming out from all these fires. Like, these are all images that are coming out of these freaking fires. Here we go again. Look at that.
ولك شيء مش طبيعي هون، شيء مش طبيعي. قلعت الدنيا. ولك شيء مش طبيعي هون، شيء مش طبيعي. طلعت الدنيا.
Oh, stop. The government's actually directed, because of these fires, the government's actually directed like military, police workers, like everybody that they get to come over and go over and help and start putting out some of these fires. Again, like on the highway, hold on, let me get this out before you go. It is the Independence Day ceremony, excuse me. They were heading to the Independence Day ceremony when all of these fires ended up breaking out. So there's another contextual clue that you had a bunch of Israelis that were flooding to head to this Independence Day ceremony when all of these fires magically broke out, and they happen to be around the roads where everybody's taking to get in there. So that's interesting enough, like within itself, right? That's interesting enough within itself. And then I ended up coming across this. This would be an article from the Times of Israel. I tended to notice that the Times of Israel leans pretty liberal when it comes to a lot of the different things that they put out. So I take that into consideration. But they said more communities were evacuated. At least 5 fires rage in Jerusalem hills. Now, I saw something yesterday. Here's something interesting. I did see something, I believe it was like yesterday or the day before, about some tourists around Jerusalem that were up over on a like hillside or mountaintop, and that some fires were started below them, and they ended up getting trapped on that mountaintop. And now I see this, and everybody's right. It is dry. I see that, Jackie, dry and windy. You're absolutely right. Perfect time to spread fires over there. Dry and windy. But they said basically that there is no freaking source of the fires that's came out yet. They're trying to sift through the ashes and figure all this stuff out. Rescue Service says 63 teams and 11 aircraft and 2 helicopters are battling the flames, which are being spread by heavy winds. All right, fire rages near decommissioned tanks at the IDF Lat Run Memorial Site outside of Jerusalem. Fire Service says 12 planes are in the air, 105 teams are on the ground battling the blaze, and the IDF to hit Syrian government sites. Yeah, there we go. So all of that crap is taking place. But the key is that they ended up saying that they have no proof or no evidence of who's actually conducting these fires. And then this came out. This is being circulated on all the jihadi networks right now. We'll call it Telegram. That they're going about and telling and encouraging people to start these different fires. Imagine that. So you have the, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where we had report of a fire that took place and trapped a bunch of tourists on a hilltop. And then you have all of these different fires that are spreading around Jerusalem right before their Independence Day parade. And then we have this happening. Now, the interesting part about this, yeah, freaking arsonists. Now, the interesting part about this is we could actually take this and we can go all the way back to LA. Obviously, at some point, over in LA, you ended up having the, how do I want to say this, the anarchists kick in that just like to watch the world burn, like to go riot, and like to do stuff. Right? However, going around on social media was also things like this. And it was a lot of Palestinian supporters that were cheering on the fires and cheering on the blazes and saying that they were doing this stuff to bring awareness to freaking Palestine. And it's amazing that all of that ended up getting suppressed in the news. Nobody came out. Nobody was really talking about that. There was actually pictures of Palestinian supporters over inside of LA that were using lasers to start freaking fires over outside of LA, claiming that they were doing that shit. And I understand that anarchists don't do that stuff, but when I use the term anarchist, I mean it like very loosely, like the people that just want to take part, right? There's always going to be people that copycat and go, well, hey, this looks like fun today, and you get the crazy people that come out. I'm talking about this in particular because this is quite literally, in Matt's opinion, the reason why a lot of this stuff ended up starting. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. Correlation doesn't equal causation. But when you start seeing acts of terror, right, that are specifically boxing people in on a hill, and then when you see an Independence Day parade or an Independence Day celebration that's supposed to take place, followed by this circulating on Telegram, followed by mass fires in and around the major thoroughways or thoroughfares that people are going to use in order to get in there, kind of makes a guy wonder whether or not Israel is actually under attack by these freaking nut jobs, because I haven't been doing a lot of reporting on it, but over inside of Judea Samaria, The IDF, Shin Bet, all of them have been going over and they've been going after some of these like terrorist ringleaders that are over in these areas. They've been going after, they've been knocking out. They've actually thwarted a ton of attacks. Recently, they've gone over, they've arrested, they've shot people. They've done a lot of different things in order to try to thwart attacks that were coming out of the West Bank. And now what it looks like, for those that don't know, Jerusalem is actually divided. So they are very, very close to this location, and it is easily conceivable that they would just be able to walk across some of these areas and be able to set some of these fires. Now there's no bushes for Hamas to hide in. That's not the point. The point is terrorism. The point is to cause chaos. The point is to cause mass disruption and confusion. Now, most of you probably don't even read squiggly, but I bet you can figure out exactly what this poster is alleging and what it wants people to do. I don't need to read squiggly to understand this, and that is the point of it. The point of it, number one, is not for you to read squiggly and understand what's going on. The point of it is for you to see and understand. They know that this is going to make its way out, and they know that the West is going to see it. They know that the Israelis are going to see this. And so that is what they are doing. And they're going around and they're causing terror over inside of Israel to spread their freaking hate. Just throwing that out there. Additionally, it looks like there is a new warning that's coming out for Lebanon over inside of Beirut. Check this out.
لبنان هذا تحذير عاجل للمتواجدين في الضاحية الجنوبية فاستمعوا إليه بعناية.
Now, I'm assuming that most of you guys aren't going to understand a dang thing that man said, so let me break it down for you. He said, to everybody present in the building marked in red as shown in the attached map and the buildings adjacent to it, you are present near facilities belonging to Hezbollah. For your safety and the safety of your family, you are required to evacuate these buildings immediately and stay at least 300 meters away from them as shown on the map. They are literally warning them of another airstrike over inside of Beirut. That's what they're doing. They're warning them of an additional airstrike over inside of Beirut. So expect airstrikes inside of Beirut to pick up, or don't be surprised when you see airstrike videos that are really well freaking filmed coming out of Beirut today. Don't be surprised if the IDF becomes further engaged over inside of Syria. Don't be surprised if the Victory Day parade over inside Moscow ends up getting freaking slammed. All of this is very, very huge news. Nate Vance, I asked you to come on the show this morning, and I forgot to send you a link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the stage. And Nate, I want you to jump in here and join me up over on the stage, over inside the Discord. Texas, I'm also looking to hear from you as well. If you're out there in the crowd, I saw you earlier. You said the stream was messed up, but not a big deal. Yiddish is the real Jew language. Changed my mind. Sean Martin, I am doing great today, brother. Thank you. Thank you for asking. I want to go over to the super chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. And I don't believe I have this morning, which is kind of freaking nice. It's almost like a little bit relieving as far as I'm concerned. Let me get my camera turned on over there so you guys can see me. As soon as Nate ends up jumping in here, Juice Junkie, I see you in there. We'll pull you up to the stage as well. As we're waiting, Texas, I see you coming up to the stage. Kind of excited to hear what Texas has to say about the strike over in Moscow, if he thinks it's actually going to take place. I think it has a very high probability of actually going down. Very, very high probability. Texas, yeah, if you're not in a good location, totally understand if you can't make it up. Juice Junkie, what's going on, brother?
Hey, not much. Hanging in there. Man, if Ukraine does that to the parade in Russia,
yep,
I'm going to freaking...
Do you think it's legal?
Video that you played.
Right.
So, I mean, I think they should have done that years ago.
Touche. I think they should have bombed the crap out of them years ago. I think they should have been allowed to target Moscow and allowed to attack, Russian territory a very long time ago with U.S. munitions and foreign munitions. It's so sad it took so long. Nate, dude, good to see you, bro. I like having you up here.
What's going on?
Let me blow you up, dude. Your studio looks great, man. Your studio looks great.
You like it?
Yeah.
It's not bad for a dumb grunt. You know what I mean?
I'm kind of impressed, man. I'm very much impressed, and you sound glorious. I'm excited for you. All right, what do you think? Do you think Zelensky is being honest here?
What I think is, if you look at like, what do you really strategically get out of hitting that parade? Now, don't get me wrong, like it is a lot of stuff, but just taking out a bunch of parade troops, because that's a whole division that does nothing but parades, right? Like those guys, from what I understand, don't even go fight. They just drive around in T-14s and break them down because they're still using World War II engines in them. And they don't really do anything, but the Russians are concerned about it, right? So if you threaten it, you can't ignore the threat because Ukraine has the capability to actually hit it. Putin's there. You got to take it seriously. In my estimation, I would say that would pull a bunch of air defense assets away from other things that are strategically valuable to Russia, like factories and munition plants and oil facilities, and things like that. They got to draw that. They got to draw that to Moscow, and if that's sitting in Moscow, it's not protecting things Russia actually needs.
So, wow, dude, that's a very valid point I didn't even think about. So if Moscow even takes this threat seriously, they're going to end up having to move some other aerial defense assets, but you'd also assume that they'd end up coming across the border. And so all of their aerial defense assets are likely already overlapping on the border. I would think as part of like shaping operations prior to this, if Ukraine was able to like identify a couple of those, that they'd end up knocking those suckers out. But I also know that they're going to have close-in systems as well, that those close-in systems would have to get moved a little bit closer to Moscow just to be safe, and that would leave those other places vulnerable.
Yep. So like you're forcing the Russians at that point, like they'd have to move a bunch of Pantsir air defense systems into Moscow and surround that thing. Because I mean, likely it's going to be a lot of drones. I think the Ukrainians are working on some ballistic missiles. I remember about 9 months ago or so, they posted some kind of stuff online about how they were getting ready to have one operational. This would be a pretty opportune time to do it. But like the reality is, what's more valuable to Ukraine to destroy? Is it a parade and a bunch of, infantry that probably aren't going to be involved in the fight and a bunch of armor that's just parade armor? Or is it drawing a bunch of air defense systems towards Moscow and either clearing up, making a tactical advantage to where now you can get some aircraft to do some like CAS type missions on the front because you've removed those like Pantsir air defense systems? Or you're forcing the Russians to spend S-400 missiles to shoot down $80,000-$90,000 drones.
Right, which is a big deal. And they'd pretty much have to take all of it as a threat. So interesting.
You can't ignore it because they've hit targets past Moscow. So they can reach that area. So you have to, if you're the Russians, you can't just sit on your laurels and be like, they don't have the balls, right? They do have the balls and they'll do it. So you have to take it seriously if you're going to have your president and President Xi and a bunch of other people out there. So likely the Russians will cancel the parade. You know what I mean? Like it's just like if it were me, I'd be like, it's not worth the risk. Why do it? But the Russians do dumb shit sometimes, so they might carry on with it. But I think the Ukrainians will use that as an opportunity to strike other things. To be honest with you, that's one of Russia's biggest weaknesses. Like everybody points out the size of their country as an asset. It makes it really hard to cover everything.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult to defend. It does. Yeah. Jeff Carroll.
So you can use it against them.
For sure. I totally agree. Jeff Carroll says, how many known civilians are estimated to be present at the parade, and what does the casualty ratio have to hit before the world considers it a war crime? Do they have the precision to pull that off? Number one, as far as civilians go, good question. I don't have those estimates in front of me right now. And under the law of armed conflict, it's supposed to be proportional to the effect that it would end up having in the fight. And I think it's very difficult to assess unless you have the precise intelligence of what key leaders would be there at the parade. Like I said, it's almost like a military pass and review where you have all these people that are just sitting up there. So when you start talking about a lot of these high-ranking people, particularly Putin, who's the main pain in the ass for Ukraine right now, if he was taken out, well, that would have a significant impact, wouldn't it? So I think...
Yeah, I mean, agreed.
Right. So what number do you put on those civilians? I mean, at that point, you could almost justify a freaking nuclear weapon going off inside of there to make sure Putin dies, because you're talking about 1 million people that have been killed. not to mention all of the internally displaced people, not to mention the war crimes, not to mention all of the other crap that Putin's been, found guilty of. So
yeah, I mean, it's like it's kind of like the ending scene of Inglourious Bastards, right? Like if you could take out, you take out all three of you in the war, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hell, I'd make that deal. And then most of the people in the grandstands are not just like some baker from down the street.
No, they're not.
They're high-ranking political officials and members of the parliament in Russia. So they're kind of part of the military system.
Yeah, what we'd call like the parade field or the parade deck is one thing, but I mean this sucker ends up stretching pretty far. And so where that particular grandstands is that Nate just pointed out is where all those high-ranking individuals are going to be. So if they end up smoking the crap out of those grandstands and they end up smoking the crap out of a lot of the people there, I don't think the equipment. I kind of agree with Nate. If there are going to have a lot of equipment on display, it's probably going to be like decommissioned or not properly running because they have enough problems with equipment as it is. But they might have some brand new weapons on display or some ones that they are just not going to use. I've seen some pretty damn big ICBMs being paraded through the Red Square before. If they go after those, let's say there's an ICBM sitting right in front of frickin', because they do end up parading those suckers through. Again, maybe they're decommissioned, but maybe they're not. If they have an ICBM that's just being toted right in front of the frickin' grandstands and a drone comes over and slaps right to the side of it and causes it to sympathetically detonate.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a hell of a fireworks show. And man, you talk about newsworthy. Can you imagine if that actually happened? Like, can you imagine like how monumental of an event that would actually be if that took place? I mean, there would be, endless discussions on whether or not it was an appropriate strike and, whether it was a war crime. I mean, to me, once you get to the point where somebody's trying to kill you, so if you think of Ukraine and Russia as two individual people, right? Mm-hmm. And they're in a fight, and once lethal force starts to be used, like all bets are off. You know what I mean? Like in a fight, legally speaking. So it's like at that point, I can hit you in the head with a sledgehammer. I can run over you with a car. I can do whatever I need to do to prevent you from killing me. So in that sense, to me, it's like, well, it's self-defense. You know what I mean? Sorry, you shouldn't have been there. You shouldn't have been doing what you were doing.
Here's the other thing I could actually see this administration doing, just like we saw like these massive depots going up, right? Like over 200,000 tons of munitions have been destroyed over inside of Russia ever since like Trump came into office. And I think some of that might have to do with some intelligence sharing that's taking place and loosening up on a little bit of the restrictions behind the scenes. So I don't think this administration is doing things like openly when it comes to supporting Ukraine. And I bring that up for a reason, because I could easily see America not only providing intelligence on like time windows in order to strike on key things like when there's going to be ICBMs being paraded in front of Putin, but I could also see us providing the technological support in order to make sure that those Ukrainian munitions make their way through and go undetected. Yeah,
I can see that. The other thing you got to realize too about the Ukrainians is they got a pretty good ground game in Russia. The SBU does some funky stuff over in Russia, and they really haven't. I don't think they've really kind of, done everything they could do. I think they're kind of saving that for the appropriate time. But they definitely have people working over in Russia for sure, and they've infiltrated that. But the other thing about the U.S. that you're starting to see, and like what we've said, for a couple of months now, is the left and the people that don't like Trump, and this is not an attempt to get people to like kind of change their political opinions about Trump, but on this particular issue, I don't think Trump has ever been really like a fan of Putin. I think there was some potential, beneficial relationships with Putin when it comes to Iran and kind of solving that peacefully. And once that fell apart, you're going to start to see the messaging campaign from the right change. And now what do you have? Like yesterday, you have Senator Kennedy coming out and saying Russia's the enemy, right? And he's been very quiet on the whole Russia-Ukraine issue throughout the entire conflict. Now suddenly Russia's the enemy. And he's kind of an insider in the Republican Party, right? So I think what you're starting to see is like a messaging campaign where they're kind of gauging what the response will be to these kind of comments. But you can clearly see where Trump is starting to say more hostile things towards Putin. You got senators coming out and saying things that are more hostile towards Putin. And I think they're really trying to kind of ramp up the pressure. And with that, what you see publicly, there's going to be a lot more happening behind the scenes. So now you're starting to see Ukraine get more brazen with their threats towards Russia, where they were trying to be kind of political before. And that's not an accident, right? Like that's not just, they're not just randomly doing that. That's all communicated that like, okay, you're allowed to take your foot off the brake now, you know? So
yeah.
And it's all coordinated that it's happening at the same time.
Hold on. I got a message I want to check real quick. Ooh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I gotta put something up on my screen real quick, Nate. Can you still see what I have going on over there? Yeah. Give me a sec. Let me open this up. This is actually extremely, extremely interesting. Texas actually just shared this with me, and I appreciate him for not jumping up and being like, "Yo, Matt, yo." But look at this IG post. Hopefully, you're able to see that.
No, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah, and
I saw that's a couple days old, but it's pretty awesome. Yeah. So tell me the ground game doesn't exist. You know what I mean?
So for those that are unaware of what you're looking at over there, you're looking at a bunch of Ukrainians in Azov shirts over by a very famous cathedral in the Red Square. And this ended up getting posted on April 21st. So pretty freaking interesting that we have, these threats taking place. And you got the dudes from Azov, like wearing Azov shirts over in front of the Red Square. I don't know what the repercussions would have been for those gentlemen should they have been caught taking that picture, like over in Russia. They would have been held as spies for damn sure. Yeah, yeah. Life wouldn't have turned out so good for them. Yeah, yeah.
No. So number one, the balls on those guys. They need wheelbarrows to carry their balls around. You know what I mean? To be able to just sit there publicly and take that picture.
Right. And it's kind of warming up over there too. So like, I don't know what day that was taken on.
Man, the thing about Ukrainians that I've learned is they are like level 99 million trolls.
Yeah.
They're professional trolls. They're so good at it. But they're funny, but they have like a dry kind of sense of humor that a lot of like Westerners don't get right away. But like once you get it, you're like, that's hilarious. Like that to the Russians is like a mushroom stamp. You know what I mean? Like that's just embarrassing for them. So yeah, and then like thinking about that right before you say, hey, you're going to have this parade, and the Russians are only thinking about aerial attacks, and that's not all they have to worry about.
So what do you think about the statements that Zelensky had made earlier in that broadcast when he was talking about going towards the U.S. for new economic sanctions to be leveraged against Russia? Because, Putin had came out talking about having the separate banking system with Iran to make sure that the sanctions don't affect him. You and I have both talked about the effects of reopening the Red Sea, what that's going to end up having on Russia. You're the one that actually brought the drones to my attention, the actual amount of aerial munitions that are fired at Ukraine that come out of Iran. How open do you think the U.S. would be? Because again, sanctions are nothing against Russia at this point. It's basically free support. And if anything, we're going to hold on to money from them. How open do you think the U.S. is going to be when it comes to hearing those sanctions? Obviously, you don't speak for the admin. Yeah. But based off of.
No, I don't. But like, I think that when it comes to pressuring, like obviously we have adversaries. Every nation is going to have adversaries. Russia is one of our adversaries right now. They're certainly not making things. They're certainly working against the United States, even if it's just through Iran, right? Like if you take away the Eastern European conflict and you just look at the fact that they are providing aid and comfort to Iran, which is our enemy, right? Mm-hmm. Like we've kind of stated that that's, they're a problem. And because of that, I think the U.S. is going to say, okay, we're going to do everything in our power to make your life difficult now. And if that happens to be through Ukraine, then so be it. Right. So I think now what you're seeing is like, okay, there was a potential friendly relationship, mutually beneficial relationship if Russia were to help us with the Iranian nuclear thing.
But they're not.
That doesn't exist anymore.
They did the opposite.
So, that's off the table. So now you're looking at Ukraine, and now Ukraine provides the beneficial relationship to the United States by being able to punish the supporters of Iran. So, and I mean, look at all the assets we moved into the Middle East. How serious is America about preventing Iran, or how serious is this administration about preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons? Pretty goddamn serious.
Right.
Right. So I think they will be very open to, like, and people want to say that like this administration is a bunch of warmongers, and I don't see it that way at all. Mm-hmm. Right. I see them as taking every possible opportunity to prevent actual taking of life. Right. Yep. Which is a good thing. So like them providing all these off ramps. I mean, sometimes we see it as frustrating because we're like, it's not going to work, but you got to do it. Right. You got to offer the off ramp. And by going and using the Ukrainian situation to impact Russia financially, which will end, I mean, wars are financial. It costs money to prosecute a war. Mm-hmm. So if you can take away Russia's ability to buy things, then you take away their ability to build weapons. Yeah. And that is good for Ukraine. So I think they'll be all about the like, that's what Kennedy said too. Like when Senator Kennedy was talking, he said, I'm not talking about nuclear weapons, I'm talking about oil. We're going to screw up their income. Yeah. And we can, and we will. And I think honestly, I think that's one of the biggest cards that the Biden administration left off the table, was going after their oil industry. Hitting them in the pocketbook.
When I read, so last night I went to go over and check and see how much it costs for the U.S. government to operate one single strike carrier group just underway. And Forbes had done I believe it was Forbes that ended up getting cited on it, but they kind of dug deep into it, and they determined at about $6.5 million a day to operate one strike carrier group underway. That doesn't include, all of the sustained combat operations that have been going on in the Red Sea. We now have 2 strike carrier groups over there, so you can easily estimate between $50 to $20 million a day that are being spent over in the Red Sea by the United States government. And that's going to have a huge economic impact once that sucker is reopened over on the EU, but it's also going to have a huge freaking impact on Russia once those shipping lanes reopen for the rest of the world. I believe the sanctions was what? They're not allowed to sell under $60 a barrel or something like that. And now the oil price is well below that. Let me check the current cost per barrel. Yeah.
Well, you'll have like West Texas Intermediate and then Brent crude, a couple of different prices, but yeah, I mean, you take a carrier group and you shoot one TLAM, that's $4 million right there. You know what I mean? So,
well,
like a lot of I don't know what kind of ordinance we're dropping on Houthis, but.
So it's came back up. West Texas is coming in at like 59. Brent's coming in at 63. So they're all circulating right around that freaking $60 mark right now, basically.
Yeah, I think the Russians
66.
can make money at. Yeah, I think the Russians can make money at 60, but not much. If you start getting below 50, though, that's the Russians they're in trouble at that point. So if you drive oil prices down lower than that, I think the answer there, me having worked in that industry for a long time, the answer there is there's so many regulations on oil and gas production in the United States, and kind of, when they say regulations, it's just a tax, right? So they just make it more expensive for operators to operate. And when some of those regulations are necessary, I'm not saying completely deregulate and just let the oil and gas industry do whatever the hell they want. You'll end up with a bunch of Deepwater Horizon incidences. But some of the regulations are just stupid, right? Like, I'm sure it's like anything else, right? You just have regulations for the sake of regulating. And if you can make things easier, like when applying for a permit, right? Like you can apply for a permit that might cost $500,000 for one permit in some regions, or it can cost $10. And all it really is permission.
So you ready for this?
If you can...
yeah, go ahead. Reuters and Bloomberg reported that the prices at the Baltic port in Primorsk fell to $52.76 per barrel on April 4th.
Yeah, and they're hurt. They're close.
Russia's benchmark for 2025 was $70 a barrel. And so with them going around 60, and that makes sense why Russia came out and announced this 15% reduction or whatever for their budget due to the oil prices and stuff. But that's not even accounting for what's to come, which is the scary part. And so Russia financially is going to be hurting. Once Iran's done munition-wise, they're also going to be hurting. And then additional sanctions is actually going to cause a hell of a lot of economic strain. So I actually think Zelensky is not too far off par when he brings that up. I don't think he's talking nonsense.
No, he's really not. And if you look at like Russia throughout history, they fight wars when oil prices are high for a reason, right? Like when oil prices are low, they shut up and get quiet, right? But when you think about Russia and break-even prices, right, it's, you have gas companies in Russia like Gazprom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at their numbers, they're going to tell you their break-even price is like $50 a barrel. But the nation's break-even price, because that's pretty much all, the profits and revenue that you get from that is what pays for the roads, their schools, their hospitals, their military, everything, right? So the nation's break-even price is going to be significantly higher than that. So if Gazprom can barely pay their people and support their own internal equipment at $50 a barrel, and they're breaking even, that means there's no money left over for any of those government programs.
Right. And
so the country of Russia's break-even price is going to be significantly higher than that.
Well, yeah, right. And as that oil price continues to drop, it's just going to hurt Russia even more because there's going to be less and less people buying Russian oil, and they're going to have to continue to up the price per barrel because they need to make up for that somehow, somewhere.
Well, it's going to continue. So like, that's the kind of conundrum that you get in when your entire economy is based on oil is the price drops and you're like, I need to sell more oil to make more money. But then if you make more oil, the supply and demand metric gets screwed up and there's too much oil and not enough buyers. So now the price drops even more, right? It's kind of a downward spiral. But for Russia, it'll get to a point where eventually you got to spend money to get oil out of the ground and ship it to people, right? And that's a real thing. And you have to do it because if you send all your oil field workers home and you shut everything down, it's even harder to get that industry fired back up. Those people go get other jobs. They'll go, they'll go do other stuff. And then trying to get them back and get back to work and fire everything up again when you need it is even harder. So, but in doing so, when prices are low, you're just driving the price even further down. Where that's the problem America doesn't have. America just lay guys off. They don't care. You know what I mean? Right. They're like, we'll get them when we need them.
So okay. So I'm going to ask you to prophesize now a little bit here, or hypothesize, I guess.
Okay.
It looks like the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are done. Like they're not going anywhere. Putin flat out said it. And Zelensky is now threatening the Victory Day parade over in the Red Square, and so are some very key figures inside of Ukraine. So what do you predict is about to happen? Do you think that we're about to see a huge uptick in violence across the front? Do you think that, what do you think?
I think if Russia starts to see that, the financial situation is is being a problem. Like think Nazi Germany, Battle of the Bulge, right? Desperation will lead people to do desperate things. So you may see some like desperate push by the Russians. I think the Ukrainians will kind of stay the course and be very diligent about hitting strategic targets when they can, when it's appropriate. They've been very disciplined when it comes to that. They're not just yeeting, all their drones and long range capability at apartment buildings or random stuff, right? They're pretty good about hitting strategic targets when they need to hit them. I think they'll continue their discipline. I think they will use the kind of desperate thought process of the Russians to make them nervous, like threatening to hit a parade, which in their desperation may cause them to bring a lot of strategic air defense assets away from the front and give them openings in actual valuable strategic targets. And they'll use that to benefit their troops on the front line. Sometimes the Ukrainians are guilty of doing the whole propaganda type victory thing. But I think they're getting better about realizing that those are kind of useless, right? Like it looks good. It creates a news cycle for a little bit, but it doesn't provide any real benefit for the guys on the ground. And I think they're kind of getting away from doing that, which is a good thing. And I think this will be another example of that. I think they'll use the fear that the Russians are experiencing right now because they are starting to panic a little bit and use it to basically like a shaping operation, like you said. So I think the threatening of the parade might be a little bit of strategic deception, but I think it'll work. and it's a threat that you can't ignore if you're Putin. So but in terms of overall violence, I think go ahead.
Andrew D wants to throw you an oorah and a Semper Fi, brother. Just throwing that out there.
Yet.
Anyways, yeah, so violence on the front, uptick more than likely is my thinking here in the next couple of weeks that all hell's going to basically start breaking loose again. I think that we're going to start seeing some more desperation coming out of Russia. I think Russia is going to, number one, the propaganda video with the North Koreans earlier. Did you see that, by the way?
Yeah, I was watching.
Yeah, 100% propaganda in my opinion. Like there's just no other way to
put
it. Like
it's bad propaganda too. Like it's not even good.
No, that wasn't war. But anywho, yeah, I think Russia's going to get desperate. I think Russia is going to start using weapons that we haven't seen before in the battlefield and go after probably more. How do you want to call it? Energy targets inside of Ukraine.
Civilian targets.
Nah, I didn't want to say civilian, but they can justify it because it goes with the infrastructure and supporting the industrial complex, and so they're going to play in that gray area a hell of a lot more.
By the way, you asked earlier. I was sorry, I wasn't at the computer, so I couldn't come up earlier. But my opinion on this, it's like word for word what Nate said. I think that Ukraine did this whole we can hit you, just keep that in the back of your head there. But they're not trying to hit them because, like he said, and I said this, I think we spoke about this last week already, or a couple of days ago, and I said, I think it's more of just know that you go and dance on the street, but I can hit you if I really wanted to. So I think it's more of a move of assets. And between me and you, if Ukraine is ever going to do something like trying to cut the head of the snake off, they're not going to do it with a cruise missile or a bunch of drones. They're going to do it somewhat very, very internally. Ukraine has a much bigger reach inside of Russia than most people could even begin to imagine.
That's valid.
Being that this conflict is so big and so popular as in the Ukraine side, but Ukraine has moved assets into Russia way before the conflict started and throughout the conflict. So if they were to ever do something like that, it would be more something way, way internal. And I just think, it's like he said, I think they're going to move a lot of air defense assets. You can already see the same thing they did last year. You see these cranes hoisting up Panzer systems on fucking rooftops. What? That's Russia. That's supposedly the second greatest military is hoisting up 18-wheeler Panzer systems onto rooftops of building in their capital city.
Yeah. So I want to address this comment real quick, and then I'm curious to hear both of your guys' thoughts on it. I just want to go over and I want to address this comment. Andrew R said, with Ukraine saying they can do anything, just know Ukraine can't stop the attacks right now. What are they going to do when the last week turns into months? So interesting point that you brought up about when it goes from weeks into months, number one. Also talking about them not able to stop attacks from Russia. You're right. You throw enough darts, eventually you're going to hit the bullseye. Russia ended up conducting some strikes over inside of Kiev. And they've also been able to be quasi-successful with some of the other things that they've been doing, right? But when you look at the actual terrain that's been exchanged along the front line, you can say that they can't stop the attacks, which is not true. Please show me on the map where Russia has made any significant advancement that would go towards completing the objective that they have set forth. They haven't.
I'd like to take this one real quick.
Yeah, sure. Let me finish, brother. Let me finish. Hold on. Let me finish, please.
I'm holding that thought real quick.
Yeah, hold on to it. And then they say, what are they going to do when the last week turns into months from Adam? When the weeks turn into months, it's really quite clear that actually, number one, works out to Ukraine's benefit because, as we just discussed, Russia's economy is essentially about to get strangled and they're about to lose about a third of their aerial munitions that they shoot at Ukraine. That's a pretty big deal. Number two, the U.S. has already identified over $60 billion worth of funding that's already been approved for Ukraine and is going to get spent on Ukraine, and that's likely going to end up going to the military-industrial complex. Largest weapons purchase from a foreign country in history to the United States of America was alleged to be, soon to be presented by Zelensky, somewhere in the vicinity of $40 to $50 billion. And again, we just found over $60 billion to supply them with weapons and equipment. So there's your answer right there. what are they going to do? They're going to get a huge influx. And Trump already said that if Putin doesn't come to the negotiation table, if neither of these countries are going to come, well, then there's the problem. But what Zelensky just hinted at, and what the United States government continues to hint at, is that Putin is not willing to come to the negotiation table. Additionally, Putin's gone against U.S. freaking beliefs that Iran should not be allowed to enrich their own uranium. They just solidified that with Iran the other day. So again, here we have them going against our strategic security policy for the United States of America. It is in the United States' best interest to ensure that that doesn't happen. It's within Israel's best interest to make sure that doesn't happen. It's also within the EU's best interest to make sure it doesn't happen. And so just assuming that what you see on CNN, Fox News, or mainstream media is somehow going to make any sort of weight on these future decisions when it comes to impacting literal economies, when you start going after the dollar, that's the problem. And you're talking about $164 billion in economic trade that was lost to the EU over the last year because of the actions of the Houthis, and Russia is directly supporting it. If you don't think the EU and the United States have noticed that, you are dead ass wrong. So I think they're going to get all the support that they need, and I think this administration does a pretty good job, at least behind the scenes, of showing that and putting all of the movement pieces in place. It's chess. It's like 4D chess. So everything's set up in order to start knocking them down. Which one of you two wants to go first?
Texas can go.
Okay, so to answer that question in very simple words, instead of rambling for a long time, Ukraine has taken out within the last 6 months more than 2 years of Russia's cruise missile production.
Correct.
That's fact. That's public, like already, like even they already cried about it internally. So you can see that every attack that Russia does, they use less of what they lost, more of something else, and then they start spreading it out. After every time Russia does a large-scale attack, they can't do that every week. They don't have the capabilities to produce on that scale that level of cruise missiles, and those where they have to use the long range. That's why you saw the last attack. They started using that was a test. Oh, can we use the North Korean ballistic missile on Kiev? Let's see if we can hit it. What could it target? How would air defense work? Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, to that, when people say Ukraine can't stop it now, what are they going to do then? Understand that every time you see in the news a massive attack hits Kiev, a massive attack hits here, understand that maybe a third or less of what is actually fired made it through on some targets. A third. Most of the time, I could say almost 100% of the time that Russia launches a massive scale attack on Ukraine, aerial attack, Ukraine air defense takes out anywhere between 60 to 75% of those targets. There's always going to be some in some areas that the specific type of munitions that are used, maybe that area doesn't have air defense capabilities to take out that type of munition. Like Shaheeds have a rate of right now, between the jamming of them and shooting them down, they have a rate right now of hitting 2 and 10. So they'll fire 10, 2 will get through. It's not a good number. It should be 0 if they have the capabilities. But understand, this is right now. So if the more Russia keeps doing this, you can see that they slow down with the numbers. They slow down with the areas where they'll attack. They'll attack Kiev less because they need longer range stuff to do Kiev. They'll do more in Kharkiv. They'll do more in Sumy because they can use converted S-300 rockets that is really made to be air defense, but they can use them to Kharkiv. They can hit the city, just point and shoot it, and then it'll hit like as a surface to surface. I think that Russia realizes that, and they're at the point where they have to slow down on what they use for aerial because they've lost insane numbers in 2 of their biggest missile storage facilities, insane numbers of losses of what they had from recent production. So I think that we're not going to see ramping up. I think just the opposite. And I think that the United States is, like, on a high level, is noticing that too, between the talks, between the games, and between the actions that they have been doing.
Yep.
So
So
yeah, I think Nate, correct me if I was wrong in this analysis of the long range aerial threats.
No, I think you're right. I mean, look, I think people underestimate how absolutely difficult.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, Texas started that off with, I'm not going to ramble, and then went on to ramble.
I was thinking the same
That's
thing.
not a ramble.
I was thinking the
That's
same
not
thing.
a ramble.
No, but I think people
go on a ramble.
Yeah, I think people underestimate just how mathematically difficult it is to shoot something out of the sky that's flying, especially if it's, going supersonic speeds. So when you say 20% get through, that's a bad number. Don't forget that 80% of those objects got shot down, and that's an incredibly difficult. I mean, think about it'd be like trying to shoot a BB with another BB. It's an incredibly difficult mathematical equation to get things that big flying that fast to contact each other. And then those, attack missiles have countermeasures, right? We've seen some of the Russian cruise missiles dispensing flares before they hit. So I would imagine that some of them have radar jammers to mess with the terminal guidance systems of the Patriots. So they're trying that kind of thing. So it's not even it's not just a matter of getting two objects to hit each other. But as far as stopping the attacks, when you say stop attacks, look at the truly strategic mission of Russia, right? That's to take as much of Ukraine as they possibly can. And they've been trying to do that for 3 years, and the line essentially hasn't moved for 3 years.
Yep.
Not in any appreciable amount. So when you say Ukraine can't stop the attacks, they've been doing that for 3 years. That's what the Ukrainian army's been doing. I saw it with my eyeballs, right? It's a real thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Nate, why don't you go ahead and let the people know where some of the notable places that you fought in?
Kupiansk, Avdiivka, Klishivka, Bakhmut, Vuhledar.
Just a couple,
pretty much
to name a few.
Pretty much from Zaporizhia to the Russian border, everywhere in between. So
yeah,
I never did go into Russia though. I didn't do that.
No. But again, if we're going to talk about notable advancements, Kursk. Whether you like it or not, notable advancement. Don't know why they did it, but they have the ability. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, a quick introduction. I brought up Goldfish. He is one of our subscribers and supporters here. He is currently in Ukraine.
Okay.
He's a previous chosen company. Now he's working with another unit. I'm sure he can go ahead and introduce himself. But that man has been in Russia. Okay.
Love to hear from him. What's up, Goldfish?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It goes good.
Sorry if I sound a little tired.
No, I hear war is tiring.
I'm out here in Ukraine still. I'm now with the 25th. I'm essentially revamping the training program that they have. 25th, this was a selection process. Very tiring process, to say the least. But it's producing some fantastic results. Before that, I was part of the chosen company. I'm one of the founding members. Before that, I was with SSO out of Kharkiv.
Nice. How do you feel about the statement, Ukraine's not able to stop Russian advancements?
I think it's very...
Man, you're coming in broken.
He's got that Donetsk Starlink.
Yeah, he does. So did you earlier. I saw you complaining in the street.
Yeah.
No. Brother, can you hear us?
I think we lost him.
Yeah, we sure did. That's too bad. That would have been good to hear from him. That sucks. As soon as he started talking, I was like, and he's gone.
Oh, no.
Oh, are you there?
There you go. You're back.
Yep. Sorry.
Okay, so start over. How do you feel about Russia's or Ukraine's alleged inability to hold back Russian advancements?
I think it's a very ignorant statement to make. People forget that this is a defensive posture that Ukraine is in. unlike Russia, Ukrainians actually give a shit about their people. And anytime you're in a defensive posture, your priority is to make sure that, at least the majority, if not all, of your people may have the chance of returning home and seeing their families. You have to accept the fact that you are going to have to plan to tactically and efficiently give up ground at some points.
Correct. There is such a thing called retrograding. That's a very real thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And just because you give up like 100 meters worth of terrain doesn't mean that you're losing. It just means I'm going to move to a more advantageous position, and you can set things up in order to kill even more Russians by doing so. And I think a lot of people that don't study war, that don't understand war, make ignorant statements like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing I think people forget too is if you advance into a new area, what happened? Everybody's confused. Nobody knows, kind of where to go. You're kind of in a disorganized state for a while until you get your feet underneath you. And in that disorganized state, you can take advantage of that and smash a lot of dudes and a lot of equipment. And that's what the Ukrainians do. They're not going to die for a random sunflower field, right? Like, you know what I mean? If it's more advantageous to give it up. It's just dirt. You can get it back later.
Exactly. And I think the other big thing is the amount.
Fertilizing.
Correct. It does. And the other big advantage that you end up getting is quite literally the attrition that comes from it. It is much better to sit in a defensive position and let people attack you. Now, the sad part is that you're in a defensive position, so you're fixed, right? But at the same time, it is much, much harder to assault a well-dug-in system. And that is why you were seeing what you're seeing on the front line. You're seeing a lot of losses because the Russians are attacking, and it's quite the opposite over on the Ukrainian side.
Absolutely, because sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No. You go. You're in a worse position than I am for signal. I can do this all day.
Yeah, I can't, unfortunately. I'm being summoned in some other places, so I'm going to have to cut it off here in the next couple of minutes. But go ahead, John.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that you're absolutely right. It's just like I keep telling everybody. If the Russians went home tomorrow, the war would be over. Mm-hmm. If the Russians, didn't make attempts at advancements, at least, then their soldiers would just go home.
Yep. Correct.
They have to have their soldiers actively doing something, or else their soldiers will realize that they're not willing to die for the piece of dirt they're standing on because it's not even their own home.
Yep. Why are we talking about Zen over in the chat on YouTube? That kind of blows my mind. JR came in gifting out 5 additional Speak the Truth memberships. Appreciate you, Jay, for coming in and gifting those suckers out. I want to make sure I got some of this down as well. Pickens says, I understand some of the talking points, but nothing changes. Ukraine is losing the war of attrition. I know many in the community will claim differently, but it's a fact. How do you guys feel about that?
They're not. They're not.
That's the wrong statement.
Ukraine's army is 800,000 people right now, currently, as we speak. The Russians have about 600,000 people in Ukraine, and they have to pay new conscripts crazy high dollar values just to get them to enlist. Yeah. And then with inflation, that number keeps going up. People think that the Russia is the Soviet Union of old, which encompassed Belarus, the Baltic states. Ukraine itself, right? The current Russia has a smaller population than the Soviet Union did in 1943. Mm-hmm. So they're not this massive, endless sea of people, right? They're not. It's just they can't sustain this forever. And their demographics are so screwed up. Their population's getting older, so their population of fighting age males is not as high as people think it is. They will run out of people eventually, right? They cannot keep this up. And some of those fighting age males have to build tanks and build guns and build bombs, and you can't take all of them and throw them out on the front. Somebody has to build those things.
Well, let's put it this way.
So
let's put it this way. Yeah. Do you think that if I went to a Russian nightclub over in Moscow and met a woman over there, I let her know that I was American, and if we got married, she could get a freaking U.S. citizenship, and I could take her ass home to America? Do you think that she would be like, no, I'm loyal to Russia? What do you think the percentage of that actually exists over there right now? Like, for those of you that are saying
5%.
Right.
5%.
Yeah.
That is probably the
5%.
that is probably the best analogy that I can give to any of you when you guys are sitting here and you're going, oh, no, these Russians 100%, they've got their back. It's the vast majority of them that are all about this war. They're all about this fight. If I throw that out there and I say, imagine I go to that nightclub, do you really think any female is going to end up turning that down? There's females over inside Russia that are talking about marrying soldiers going to the front lines just so when they
I don't
get
think
killed,
any
they can
male
afford to
would
get an
turn it
apartment.
down.
I don't think a male would turn it down either.
Anybody would like to leave Russia that hasn't yet been fucking conscripted.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they had to shut their border down to prevent people from leaving.
Yeah.
Like, does anybody forget
Also,
the beginning stages of the war when there was like lines,
I do.
Miles long of people to get out of Russia so they didn't have to do this?
I 100% do, man. And it drives me nuts that people look and think this way. All right, guys, I'm unfortunately going to have to close it down before I go. I want to thank Chrisers for gifting out a Speak the Truth membership, BBG and JR, both for coming and gifting out 5 each. So thank you guys very much for those donations. Appreciate it. Kind of survive off those suckers. I want to thank Nate for coming on the show in Texas for his invaluable input that he always ends up throwing up there. Excuse me, valuable input that he ends up throwing in there. Nate, final thoughts.
No, I hope on May 9th, a bunch of ammunition depots and oil depots blow up. And I hope the whole time Putin and his general staff have their booty holes puckered all day, waiting for something that never arrives. And it just happens somewhere else.
You know, the other interesting thing
I feel
about
like
that
a
particular
whole lot
time
less
frame.
when you're traveling by car.
You know, the other particular interesting thing about that time frame, just to go back to your May 9th comment, that is also roughly the time in which Iran's deadline is estimated to be for 60 days.
Interesting, right?
Funny
Interesting, right?
aligns.
If both of them, if they get the old Eiffel Tower at the same time, that'd be hilarious.
It would be.
Beep, beep.
Go ahead, Texas. Sorry, man.
All right.
Closing thoughts
All
today,
right.
Texas. What you got? 5 minutes or less.
5 minutes or less. I say, let's sit back and watch the fireworks. But I don't think it's going to be in the Red Square. I think it's going to be on some Air Force base or some storage, or even we'll see like something like Crimea or something absolutely getting hammered, and they'll be over there like watching it on the big screen in the Red Square. That's what I think. I think Storm Shadow, maybe even the first time seeing German tourist missiles smacking Crimea. I think that's a very big possibility. I'm just going to say, if it happens, don't come and tell me I told you so.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on
That's
that
all.
one. Yep. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you gentlemen for joining me. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thanks, Fish, for jumping up.
Yeah, Fish, appreciate you,
Hey, yeah,
man.
no worries. I needed a break from writing reports anyways.
Oh, Fish, we're going to get you back in here again. I didn't even realize you were here. So we'll get you back in here again. I'll make sure Texas connects us. All right, brother?
Oh, yeah, sounds great. Appreciate you, man. Love your work.
Thank you, friend. All right, gentlemen.
All right. Cheers. Have a good one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. Tonight, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're going to end up having another live session to go over all these freaking developments that are taking place over in the Middle East and also over inside of Ukraine. I'm going to keep a very close eye on all of this stuff. Also, wanted to give an update. Ended up getting these maps. Let me get this up on the screen. It's kind of interesting. Ended up dropping it in the chat a little bit as far as these fires are concerned. This with a giant question mark, what you're looking at. Like I said, you have all of these fires that are raging over around Israel, and you end up having that freaking poster that ends up getting put out. Over here is the West Bank. This would be the Palestinian Authority's territory. Wouldn't you happen to know it? All of these fires are going all the way around their border, all the way around. Imagine that. I wonder if terrorism may or may not have been involved in that entire incident as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until I see you guys this evening,